the larger the sales team is, the less productive it becomes. Our NPS is 54. Average software NPS is 23. I think best in class SaaS is 34 or 35. We spend more time choosing the folks we bring in than managing them. I can easily say that. I've probably spent 40, 50 hours making sure that this is the right person, especially for leadership positions. And then I don't need to spend 40, 50 hours to manage them in the next 6 months, right? I would say in the 0 to 1 stage, the number one thing that matters is that your customer values your product, that they would be scared if it's taken away. This was a big one. I do firmly believe now that you can build a like 100 million enterprise SaaS company, even if you looked at India plus some shoe markets in Asia. That was the shock. Like the path is different. You have to know that is the path right from the beginning. Albert Einstein would not have been successful at McKinsey.
Hey everyone, join us for a chat with Yamini Bhatt, co-founder and CEO of Vimo, a company that's reshaping sales engagement in the financial sector. Yamini is an alumnus of BITS Pilani and IIM Bangalore with some time spent at McKinsey. Yamini leads Vimo, which aims to be the world's most trusted sales engagement platform for financial institutions. Vimo's mobile-first approach tackles 18-plus industry-specific challenges with intelligent nudges and playbooks, uniquely focused on banks, insurance, and financial services. Vimo's impact has been recognized by Forrester, Gartner, Microsoft, and CB Insights. Discover how Vimo, founded by Yamini, is transforming not only sales but also the lives of salespeople who use it. Yamini, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much, Aviral.
So, Yamini, we'll start with the rapid fire. Coffee with Karan season is done, but we continue. So the first question is, if you could be a professional in any other field, what would it be?
Oh, I would probably be in public policy.
And why?
So I feel like that's the place where you need to work a lot, do a lot of influencing, so all the skills come to bear. But one simple change can have some of the highest amount of impact. And there's enough things that need to change constantly, right? So that's why.
Yamini, what are 3 things you think are overrated about consulting?
I think it's assumption that the person comes with the knowledge and background of what they're working with. Usually we work hard to build that knowledge while we're consulting. We don't come with the knowledge, given most consultants are pretty young. Pay, it's not the most highest paying. Many assume it's the highest paying, but I gave up an investment banking offer to join consulting, and it was 1/5. Right now, of course, there is a geography angle here, but still, in any given market, consulting, there are many other positions which are higher paid than consulting. Usually, you go to consulting for the experience, for the training, etc. So it's more like a finishing school. That's it too, I think. I found it hard to have a third bullet point after leaving consulting. In consulting, 3 bullet points. I realized that after leaving, I've usually struggled with beyond 2 points.
That's a good one.
Maybe that's the third point.
Yeah, exactly. It's very meta. It's a nice answer. Okay, then the third question is a bit of a lazy question for us. So, what is one question you would ask yourself if you were the host of the podcast?
I would ask myself what makes me happy about what I do, or unhappy about what I do, probably. Yeah, because I ask myself constantly. It's part of being probably centered as a leader. Yeah. But now I ask the question, so I don't have to give the answers, right?
Yeah, so we'll ask you this question. Bootstrap versus funded?
I think both have their pros and cons. And I would say funded if you have very clear line of sight into a very high TAM, a potential way to exit, which could either be IPO or strategic, but both require certain scale and a clear path on execution. Then definitely funded because it helps you speed up. If any of these are limitations and you would rather control the pace at which and ensure that you can control your destiny, then probably bootstrap. But both are probably the right or wrong answer depending on the context.
Understand. How would you describe your company's culture using 3 phrases or adjectives?
So I would say we are extremely customer obsessed. Right, customer obsession always also comes at the cost of sometimes profitability, sometimes scalability, etc. I would say in the early stage of our journey, being customer obsessed helps people make the right decisions when things are hazy. And if you have happy customers, I think longevity automatically gets taken care of. Customer obsession, definitely. Then striving for excellence, right? It is something that we have to reset ourselves on every 2 3 years as the team grows, as we get distributed geographically or remotely, etc. It's not easy, but there is constant effort to make that. And I would say probably being able to support each other in mutual growth. I we are like we are absolutely committed to that, to making everyone an owner, to supporting their success, um, and we strive to do that as we grow. It's something that requires very conscious effort to have each other's back throughout. But I do believe like a team has my back, and I do believe I have theirs. Right. So
On the third one, how do you ensure that happens across a company, especially when you scale?
it's not easy. I can't say that like the 435 employees, I know like I have their back every single time. But to the extent that we can, one, we do it for people that we probably work directly with more regularly, and set the design principles for them to be able to support others, right? Simple things like probably flexibility, or balancing the personal aspect with the work aspect. We expect people to build long careers here,
Right.
right? And that if you have an expectation of 8 to 10 years, right? We are only 10 years old, and we have people who are 8 years plus at Wimo, right? So then they're probably going through multiple life stages with us, right? And throughout that, their needs might be different. What matters might be different for them, both from work as well as off work. And being able to support them through that journey, helping them discover, helping them balance what they're really great at, helping them get to where they really want to get to. And many times it might just not be a career goal, it might be some other goals
Right.
also. And being able to build around that is something that we have strived to do. I again cannot say that we've done this for all 435. Maybe not all 435 have given us a chance to do this too. It also has to come from both sides,
Yeah.
where you decide to make this a long career and you decide to make it work, right? So, but that is the effort. And I hope that the examples we have set with people Venkat and I directly work with are similar examples they are trying to emulate with the teams that they work with.
Understand.
I guess there is a word for it, lead by example.
Example. Maybe that's another culture phrase that you
Maybe
have.
that is. Yeah.
And finally, on the rapid fire, what is one truth you deeply believe in that few people agree with you?
I just feel India is the place where we have the highest level of opportunity. Especially India has to be the place where Indians can be more successful, right? Not many believe that. Clearly, we've had a like significant majority of our brains leaving,
Hmm.
uh, but I firmly believe that, and I firmly believe, you know, people should not miss the opportunity. And if they find problems, those are just opportunities that can they can actually build their careers uh, by solving, right? So
Yamini, talk us through your growing up, where you from, early days, any influences that may have resulted in you becoming a founder. You obviously gone to top tier colleges, had a very strong pedigree, work experience as well, and then you made the jump. So talk us through that, the thought process, why you did this, eventually what's the motivation, uh, building up to Vimo.
my dad worked for NABARD for, I mean, most of his career, about 35, 40 years or so, from the time I was born until he retired. So he got the offer letter the day I was born, is what I
Oh
hear.
wow, that's so nice.
Right. So, yeah. So, of course, I get all the credit for that, wrongly or rightly. Right. So, anyway, so NABARD is into rural livelihoods and financing. It's the original NBFC of this country. It was part of, it was really the pillar that drove a lot of the green revolution, and then many other programs that have improved rural livelihoods and sustainability, right? So I used to tag along with him. I used to try and understand what he was trying to do. I've been to many farm visits with him, many of these, small micro entrepreneur kind of workshop sessions, conferences, etc. When I was a kid. So by nature, it was, these are micro entrepreneurs, most of these, including farmers, right? But so by nature, the fact that you create value out of whatever you own or not own, right, has always been something that's been inspiring, whether it's a farmer who does that or a or a self-help group that comes together, whatever that is, right? So I think that was the background of how I grew up, and dad always wanted us to get to top tier schools, etc. Naturally happened. Like my brother, me, and my sister, all three of us went to BITS Pilani. People ask us if we had a family discount. We didn't. Just to clarify.
Yes.
So we went to
Sure.
BITS. BITS was an interesting place, and there.
Were you all
Uh,
overlapping as well as families?
I was the luckiest because I overlapped 3 years with my brother, and then he graduated and my sister came in. So I was like, I never figured out how to book tickets home because my brother had figured it out. And then I told my sister that, hey, you need to learn this because how will you do this when I'm not around? So I made her learn everything that my brother was doing for me. So clearly, delegation is my strength.
And it's the first time I've seen someone take so much advantage of being a middle child.
Yeah, yeah.
Generally, people say, "Ki main middle child, nobody cares about me. It's either the oldest or the youngest." But it was
Now, I've
pretty.
also recently seen a reel where it says every family needs to have a Capricorn who believes they are the they're the most favored child, right? So I've always
Right.
believed, I've always believed that, and therefore maybe I have manifested that. But I'm like, yeah, we're very close as a family, and I've been lucky, sandwiched between two people who care a lot,
Mm.
and so BITS was pretty interesting. I think BITS has this really amazing culture of until 10th and 12th, everyone is probably what grades matter, etc. Right? And then BITS was this world where classes are not mandatory, attendance is not mandatory. It's absolute, it's relative grading, not absolute scoring, uh, right? And you can choose your professors, you can make your timetable. You're given a lot of freedom, right?
Mm.
So you can actually choose. It makes you think. Actually, giving someone a lot of freedom really makes them think how they want to run their life and what they're trying to get to and what is the fastest path or lowest friction path to be able to get there. So all those optimizations were done well.
Absolutely.
Uh, right.
Correct.
Also, BITS Pilani in those days was 200 kilometers away from any
Civil.
pizza or burger. So you were kind of forced to be a little bit entrepreneurial if you had to figure out if you had to do anything.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we were in some ways cocooned, but also uh, had to be resourceful in many ways. Whether it is about how to hack your calendar, timetable, grades, whatever it was, but we had to be resourceful. It was not a clearly laid out path, and everyone could find a way, right? So that culture of BITS, I think, is extremely important in the background of how many BITSians actually became entrepreneurs later,
Mm.
right? That was pretty fantastic, and from there I started becoming a little bit more clearer on what I wanted to do. I felt like my parents wanted me to go abroad for MS, etc. I felt like I wanted to stay here. I felt more inclined towards IS. I had interfaced with some of the public sector workers through dad's work,
Mm.
and I felt that was pretty inspiring. And being able to even what dad did during his tenure there was impacting hundreds of thousands of lives. So policy would then be levels above that, right? And that was extremely inspiring. And I knew it would be a lot of hard work. But with that background, it's decided not to go for MS and chose to do MBA while figuring out the whole IAS bit. During MBA, but I was always keen to go out and learn. So during undergrad as well as grad school, I did go on my internships outside. I had multiple job offers uh, there. And then I think it all came to a head when I had to decide after business school. And I was still not 29. 29 was the cutoff for IS. So the thought was just work and prepare on the side. That's when I joined McKinsey. And did explore a bunch of public sector related stuff, had an opportunity to actually work with a member of parliament, so on. Chose consciously. Anyway, most of my work was at McKinsey was on sales transformation, worked with very large enterprises across India, worked in the US for a couple of years. So that skill build, like that functional knowledge and expertise was building on the side. And then after 5 years, when we moved back to India, um, decided to figure out what to do next. And at that point in time, policy versus what else was the question mark. And then I actually spent time meeting people, trying to figure out where I could be most, in some ways, I call it successful, but the criteria here is where can I have the most impact in the least friction way. And it just felt like my temperament, need for speed, frustration with things not moving, etc. That kind of a temperament may not be the ideal one for for a bureaucratic position. And most people advised me that either you can wait for 20-25 years to have a say, or you can try to find some other way to get there. Uh, and anyway, had multiple discussions, spoke to a lot of mentors, and it felt like I might be able to have the highest impact by doing something that is highly valued and where I can bring my skills, right? That's what led to the whole entrepreneurship journey. Um, and I love that aspect of what we do here as a company. I've always said that, hey, if it's not about, a 500, just that we've become a 500 people team, every time I look at that number, I ask myself if these 500 or 400, whatever that number at that point is, right? Are these people learning or feeling that they can go and do this themselves, right? Can they have this kind of impact themselves? Are we doing a multiplier effect, or are we just leveraging people to get to some end state of Waymo? Right? And now we have aged enough for us to have alumni who are placed in multiple different, other companies or have set out on their own entrepreneurship journey. I do feel that we have started creating a workforce or started creating talent which actually dreams big and uh, grows bravely towards those goals, right? I do think we are creating that. That was one thing I used to love about McKinsey, that McKinsey was more like a finishing school, right? You teach folks a lot through an intense, um, what can be seen as a curriculum, and then people go out and try to solve big problems, right? And I'm hoping that some of that is what we can do at Waymo.
So walk us through that journey. You decided to start up. It was about the impact. What you picked this space because it was something you're familiar with, but how
Yeah.
did you kind of make that transition
First of
and
a
go
bunch of
step this
ideas,
side?
and a wise person, which, like my husband, asked me, "What is it that you know really well? What is it that you know that like you have unique knowledge about, and people are willing to pay money to solve, right?" And that matrix ended up being, I'd done a lot of work on sales productivity improvement, and saw a lot of frustration with large enterprises on trying to solve that problem. And it felt like something that could be solved through software. And Venkat and I, my co-founder and I, we've been batchmates since Bits Pilani, right? And uh, we felt like together we brought our experience of tech into a real world business problem, which is the white space. And that's how we set out on this journey.
And how did you guys decide that you would work together? I mean, did you know that
More
you would work together right away?
Yeah.
Or
I've always been very extroverted. Some of my best ideas come while brainstorming with folks, etc., and that gives me a lot of energy. So I was pretty clear that I would want to do uh, the whole entrepreneurship gig with the co-founder. Venkat and I were batchmates in bits. We were both doing computer science majors. We used to do our assignments together, and we had a very easy working relationship, like absolute trust. And I would jump off, he would jump in very smoothly into getting things done. So that friendship continued. We stayed in touch. And he also was looking to move back to India. I was also planning to move back. And somewhere where I think separately, both of us decided to start up, then we started discussing ideas and agreed that this might be where our skills come to bear in the best way possible.
so, can you walk through what exactly your initial value proposition was to your first few customers, and what was the pitch? How did you go about?
So it was fairly simple. For us, the thesis that we had was that large sales teams uh, become the larger the sales team is, the less productive it becomes. There is a lot of time that goes into training, motivating, aligning everyone, driving playbooks in terms of what are the things to do to get the best outcomes, etc. The larger the org, the bigger the problem. So our goal was, hey, how do we solve that problem and use tech? And mobile first was a very new thing, cloud first was a very new thing, especially financial services, right? So then we went to people we thought would have this problem, and that was across multiple sectors. started having conversations with them on, hey, in terms of managing your sales teams or meeting your outcomes, what are the things that you would like visibility into and what drives decision making, right? And whatever that was, we would start making mock-ups and trying to build journeys and trying to test it out with them. Right. So practically we sold our first 2-3 major customers on the back of like mock-ups. And then Venkat started building that out. And our bar was right from day zero that if this is a important enough problem, people will be willing to pay because we know that there is no other solution doing this. And if you really, right. So that became a threshold for who filters into, where we spend energy. Right. And that probably was one of the wisest calls. We didn't look for people giving us opportunities to do something. We look for people who are willing to pay to solve a problem. And over, as we spoke to more and tried to layer that filter, and as that filter became higher, who will pay the most, who will pay the fastest, right? Suddenly, somewhere, this whole financial service is a very commoditized product. Everyone has a loan, everyone has a account, right? Everyone has a credit card. So your differentiation comes from your distribution strength. And therefore, your need to solve that and stay on top of it is extremely critical. And these organizations are huge and they're still growing because financial inclusion is still like single digit in this country, right? So, or in most places, depending on the product. So naturally, that became, in retrospect, it's easy to draw a pattern in a straight line. But I think some of the design principles were, work with those who are willing to pay and pay enough to, justify that ROI on our time spent and for themselves.
That's really helpful, kind of walking us through that thought process. Can you also tell us what your product does and how does it fit into the sales ecosystem? I think for people like me who are not as familiar, we know about CRMs like HubSpot and Salesforce. Where do you guys?
So Vymo is used by financial advisory teams to be able to drive better sales outcomes. Think of it as a mobile first solution think of these as organizations with 200, 2,000, 20,000, 50,000 sellers distributed in the field. And there is high levels of attrition, new people coming into this group, etc. They have a large community of customers that they need to engage, prospect into it, and so on, right? So Vymo is a mobile first solution that helps them with next best actions. It suggests what are the 5 things you could do to meet your outcomes the fastest, lowest friction way, right? And that in the back end takes care of what your customers need, what to position to them, how to communicate with them. A lot of that intelligence is built and nudged to you in the form of simple actionable nudges, right? So that's how it operates.
How did you go about really, fleshing out this value proposition? You spoke to your first few customers. You had a big problem. You kind of had a general framework for tackling it.
So
How do you go about?
I think in the initial conversations, the ones that moved fastest was where this was a burning need versus a nice to have. Yes, I would love to have a tool versus, hey, you know what? My targets have increased 20%. I literally cannot do this without knowing what's happening on the ground, right? And I remember us doing whiteboarding with customers for who this was a must have product with a tight timeline linked to their own goals, business goals, right? And then we saw a lot of agility. Ultimately, we probably got pulled where there was speed, right? Where our clients showed speed. And that itself is the whole product market fit definition, right? You automatically get attracted towards where there is speed. And if there's enough of that happening in our cluster, that is where your the market for your product is. And then we went and we kind of understood the journeys that multiple similar customers might need, went back with our point of view on what if we were able to do ABC, and they loved 80% of the idea, and then 20% they wanted to add a few angles which were what is contextual to them, right? We converted that into a mock-up, built it out, launched it with them in I think 6 to 8 weeks or so, and then tracked certain metrics like active usage, screen, actions. We instrumented the product and tried to track engagement very, very seriously. Right? One of the biggest differences between most and all enterprise products and ours, especially sales tech, is that in Vymo, we actually track and expose our adoption and engagement directly to the customer. There is no tool out there, no major CRM that actually says, hey, at this point in time, these many of your users are live, because in most cases, only 10% of the users are using in a month. In Vymo's case, 70-80% are live this minute. If I open the dashboard, you'll see that number. right, across 8 countries and 300,000 users. And to be able to maintain that from day zero, our adoption was 70% plus, and today it is the case. And to be able to maintain that, there has been an insane amount of focus and DNA that we've built in the company that matters. Our NPS is 54. Average software NPS is 23. I think best in class SaaS is 34 or 35. Right? Our NPS is 54. I remember our product head when we were 34, 35, someone said, let's have a target, let's make it 40. Who knows? Like it was just pulled out of thin air, right? And all of us looked at each other and said, why not? And today it is 54 and it is possible. Maybe it can actually get to 60. Right? But there have been mechanisms in place where constantly someone is looking at what can we improve on engagement and experience, right? And that differentiates us massively from most enterprise tech. And if we said we are going to work with sellers to help them do more, sellers don't like to be managed, right? So, and that is why most tools fail in sales tech. And by being able to build something that sellers actually like to use and helps them, we were able to break this constant cycles of failures that most of these enterprises were having in deploying sales tech, right? And like that has like we have one in good years, like non-COVID type of years, we have had 145 plus 145% plus net revenue retention. It's basically $1 of your revenue automatically goes in that customer base to $1.45 the next year, right? That kind of growth and that's a very powerful tool for SaaS companies to grow. Right. So all of that has been fed by the original design principles.
And so how did you, I mean, you spoke about how your team was kind of working towards this. Can you tell us some of the structures that you put in place and how you actually built out the team?
So in terms of, I said, there are many different angles how we built out the team in terms of
Yes.
keeping user experience and adoption and usage, that basic value proposition in mind while designing everything. There are teams that constantly look at NPS. There are teams that constantly track. There are customer success teams whose job in the first 3 months of deployment is to get to 80-90% daily usage. That's the first KPI
Okay.
they have to match. So there are teams whose goals are this, right? There is a team in product that is looking at NPS, seeing what is the feedback that's taking us down, and how do we fix that, which becomes a stream, a continuous work stream in product and engineering, etc. Right? So there are teams structured to look at this, right? And basically, what gets tracked gets improved, right? So that's how this part of it runs. In terms of how we build the team, I think it's dramatically different how we build the first 30-50 people team versus how we build now. Right now, it's very highly specialized skills. There is weightage to cultural fit, agility, those kind of stuff, but also there is highly specialized hiring that we do. But the fundamental principle is, are they making the team better when we bring them in? Or do they have the potential to make the team better, right? Even a fresher can make the team better by bringing in, agility, customer orientation, ability to listen and learn fast, right? It just doesn't have to be on, here is the person who is like, freshers are not the people you look at to build something fantastic because of technical knowledge, right? But they can still culturally make you a better team. And similarly for senior folks, right? And Venkat, I've always believed that if you're hiring someone, we're probably hiring them because they know this much better than us, whatever aspect of it is, right? And in general, we've spent more time choosing the folks we bring in than managing them. I can easily say that I've probably spent 40-50 hours making sure that this is the right person, especially for leadership positions, and then I don't need to spend 40-50 hours to manage them in the next 6 months, right? So those are fundamental principles. But on day zero, I didn't know how to interview product managers. I didn't know how to interview engineers, etc. And I used to go around, ask people who are tell me, who do you admire as a product manager? And someone would name someone in Ola, and then I would go try and meet that person and say, and they'd be very confused, like, why are you interviewing me for a B2B position? I was like, I'm not interviewing you. I want to know, how do you interview people, and how were you interviewed, right? What are the questions they asked or what are the questions you ask as a product manager when you hire a product person, right? And it was very interesting, the things that they do. And I started mimicking some of that stuff, right? And started learning on how to do this. So everything we were trying to do was the first time for Venkat and me, practically. You do none of this at McKinsey, right? So, but there are ways to learn. There are people who have done stuff like this before.
Maybe some kind of general advice for people, especially in B2B sales. It's always difficult What are some of the things that work well? What worked for you guys, and for founders who are starting up? What are some tips that they should?
I would say in the 0 to 1 stage, the number one thing that matters is that your customer values your product, that they would be scared if it's taken away. Right? You have to create that level of value, and you have to be extremely, extremely honest. Right? And hopefully you're doing it in a space where there is enough of those customers. That's the whole TAM thing, right? Most of those you'll probably discover in the 1 to 10 stage. The homogeneity of the market for the like how big is the homogeneous market, whether it's a geography. If you start in India, suddenly TAM becomes a limit. If you're starting in US, usually do not have, until you're 50 million towards the 100 million journeys, when you'll probably look at international, right? So those choices do make a difference. But being extremely honest about the value that you're delivering to a client, it comes from you actually tracking the right metrics on outcomes for the customer, not about pushing features, but actual outcomes. Build only 2 features, that's fine too. And you have to have enough conviction to be able to challenge the customer on features versus outcomes, right? Otherwise, suddenly you're building a whole spread and like another Me Too thing. And the customer should be willing to pay, and worried about switching you off after a POC, right? If you're building something of that quality in the 0 to 1 stage, the 1 to 10 becomes fairly easy. Then most of the 1 to 10 you're figuring out are go-to-market related stuff, being able to build sales execution, scale sales execution related stuff, not really fundamental questions on your product.
And Yamini, you did a very interesting thing. You started with India for a SaaS company, especially B2B SaaS. It's not the typical style, and everyone also thinks that India ke baad you should go to the US, but you did Southeast Asia and then you went to the US.
Yeah.
Talk us through that thought process. Is it related to your conviction about India as well in some sense?
This was not really like when we moved back from the US. We knew that if we were doing this, we were doing this for the global market, right? Uh, it was just easier to do the initial product market fit, and suddenly we found momentum very quickly.
Okay.
That was the whole white space thing, right? Like from like 100K to the 1 million journey happened very, very fast for us, even before we could consolidate in our minds what we were doing and how to take it elsewhere, right? And then suddenly the demand from neighboring became easier, low hanging fruit for us. And these were larger tickets, right? So it's not like you can sell them on a phone in the US. It required us to, in early stage, by the time we were Series A, I think our ACVs were tending towards 75, 80K. So at that
Mm.
point, these were not tickets that you could close on a phone or through a partner as a
Right.
new product in a new category. Right? There was a lot of value selling that was required. So suddenly, global meant field sales for us, like having teams on ground, right? And that kind of like by the time we built momentum towards that, COVID happened. So then most of that was a timeline with many macro external factors, etc. But from the time we were able to travel post COVID, again, we have been going hard behind trying to crack US as a market and then having early wins there, now building the execution momentum and so on. So I wouldn't say that the judgment on, US is the biggest market for enterprise and try to win there first. I don't think that is different. Our timeline just evolved in a certain way. Right. And the shock that has been for us is how big Asia turned out to be.
Right.
Right? We didn't expect to have the scale that we have today, just servicing Asia, a large part of that, like a significant, meaningful amount of that from India, and still the upside and growth that we see. Maybe it's the vertical. It's not just the vertical that we picked, right? Because even if you look at tech and uh, selling into tech as an industry, or selling into retail as an industry, or selling into media as an industry, all these verticals are exploding in Asia, right? So I don't think anyone anticipated what Asia could be. We actually like thought maybe 1 million or not more in Asia, right? And
Right.
that was the usual VC wisdom also. So all of us have been surprised by how big Asia can be, right? Uh, but that has been a pleasant surprise and has fed people for longer than they expected. But that doesn't change the fact that in a horizontal solution or a category, US tends to be usually the largest market.
And what were the other surprises that you saw, not just related to the geography, but in general? Like, were there some hypotheses that you had that kind of proved out to be the opposite once you started building out the company or once you scaled? Anything top of mind, maybe top one or two things.
So this was a big one. I do firmly believe now that you can build a like 100 million enterprise SaaS company, even if you looked at India plus some few markets in Asia.
Wow.
That was the shock. Like the path is different. You have to know that is the path right from the beginning.
Right.
Uh, it may look slightly different because it's not a homogeneous market when you think of Asia.
Of
But it
course.
is possible, is what we've realized, and that too in one vertical. So I mean, for people who are horizontal, it's probably you know, even more easy. Like there are ways to do it. It's not the typical SaaS playbook though,
Right.
right? It requires M&A, it requires consolidation for speed, etc. More for speed in a smaller market, but it can be done. That has been a eye-opening thing. Can you sell into large enterprises? Like Berkshire uses our product, like Tokyo Money kind of folks use our product, right? Can you sell to these kind of enterprises by building a product out of India? I think that like enterprise grade product out of India, where also configuration, customization, local support, etc. is needed. That has always been a question mark for investors and even founders, right? But that we felt is something that's now proven, done and dusted,
Mm.
can be done, right? And there is a lot of faith in being able to do the product and engineering for world from India. That
Mm.
too in a new category, right? That's been a pleasant surprise too. For the
Interesting.
longest time, we have wondered if we need to build there to be able to service that market, right? But it seems like we can build and service from here. We'll have to sell locally. That's different.
Fascinating. And what does the next few years look like? I generally ask, what do you think Vimo will be in 2033?
I think our mission for the next 3-4 years is pretty straightforward. There are a bunch of new markets where we have had product market fit and initial, the 1 to 10 journeys are over. These markets now who need to go through the 10 to 100 kind of a journey, right?
Mm.
Which are actually the major big markets, US including. So heads down execution for us towards that goal is the number one priority. And that's actually very comforting because when you are going through the 0 to 1 stage or 1 to 10 stage in these markets, there are many iterations and question marks on things that you need to do. But this stage where you need to now focus and bring predictable execution, is a is a is a good problem statement for the next 3 to 4 years for us.
Understand. And the final question, why we call this Founders Unfiltered? What's one piece of unfiltered advice or feedback you received as an entrepreneur that really changed your perspective? And brutal honest would be helpful. You don't need to reveal who gave you that feedback.
Sure, okay. No, that's fine. I think even from McKinsey times, people used to say that, I mean, folks used to be a little bit scared because of me, apparently. I've heard that because they felt I was extremely judgmental, had a very high bar on judging people. But I think the problem was not like having a high bar on judging people, but probably being single dimension or limited in my dimensions on how I look at people. Right? Even at McKinsey, the transition happened where we moved from trying to coach people on what they're not good at versus looking at what the strengths of someone are and how to use that to deliver excellence in outcomes, right? Not to bring everyone to the average, but to pick a strength and make them excellent, right? I think it was called strengths-based coaching or so. And that was eye-opening. And I don't think it's still easy for everyone to implement, especially if you are the type I am, you want to move fast, want to get there quickly and get to black and white answers fairly. It's easy to judge and write off, certain things. But I do believe it was a lot of conscious, unconscious effort, but I do believe I've become someone who now can look at a situation or a person and automatically latch on to, hey, here is something that is an outstanding strength of this person, and how do we make that successful? How do we use that to, make it work for both of us rather than, harp on what probably is a nagging limitation of that person.
The strength-based coaching is quite interesting. And now that I've spent a decent amount of time with startups and in the ecosystem, I think a lot of people still focus on removing the weaknesses rather
Yeah,
than
so it's the basic joke. I mean, I don't know if I heard this or I made this up myself, but this whole Albert Einstein would not have been successful at McKinsey. That's the easiest way to say it, right? Like, now what do you say?
Yes,
Uh,
very good.
so, and that made me look at people in a very, very different light.
Awesome. On that note, Yamini, thank you so much. It was an awesome chat. Very good quote to end with. Thank you for sharing so openly with us.
Thank you so much, folks. It was lovely being here.